You're listening to the Faith Breathed Hope podcast, episode number 15. Today, I speak with friend and entrepreneur Jenifer Ramirez on welcoming a new life into this world after the loss of a child, acceptance, and being joyful like Maggie. Welcome to the Faith Breathed Hope podcast, where we gain inspiration and motivation from others who share their touching stories of renewing hope and discovering purpose in any circumstance. I'm your host, Christina Reisinger, and today we will be encouraged by another tremendously inspirational topic that will embolden you to release fear, begin taking small steps forward, and move into your God-given purpose to live and serve in this life. Join me for today's story. And hello, Jenifer. Welcome to Faith Breathes Hope. I am so glad that you are here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you.
So Jenifer was with me in the 2019 Grief Symposium, and I found out about her in a group on Facebook, and we have kept in touch all this time, and she's agreed to come share her story here on Faith Breathed Hope. And so, Jenifer, can you just tell the audience who you are, what you do, kind of a little bit about your story and how we came to have this, collaboration and friendship?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jenifer Ramirez, and I have 5 children. I've been married, in July it will be 17 years, and we have one on the way due early June. So life is crazy and busy, and there's a lot to do and a lot to think about, a lot to push through. We actually lost our daughter Magdalene Therese May 6th of 2018, so we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary very, very quickly here. It's a little surprising that it will be 2 years already. It feels like it just happened yesterday. And I won't go into a huge amount of detail. I think for new grieving mothers, I know for myself it was very, very difficult to hear all of the intimate details of another child's death after my daughter died. So I don't necessarily want to go into all of those tiny details, but suffice it to say she had a brain tumor that we didn't know about, and she was gone within 28 and a half hours. So it was very, very fast, just completely out of the blue. We had no idea at all that this was happening. It's been a very long process since she died. But we've definitely been able to find some healing. I can tell that healing is taking place in our family. It's taking place within my own heart. And I didn't think in the beginning that would ever be possible. How can you actually heal from the loss of a child? When your child dies, how is it possible for your heart to be okay after that? And it doesn't mean that everything is okay, but it does mean that joy can be found again. And that's one of the things that my husband and I have really been trying to pursue for our own family and to encourage other families, whether you've lost a child or you're going through some other type of suffering. We're all going to suffer in our lives. And it's one of the reasons that we launched our little ministry called Joyful Like Maggie. Our daughter was always a very joyful child, no matter what was going on. She was a life of the party. She always wanted the family movie nights. She kept the whole family really going in this spirit of joy. And so that's something we're trying to take, that spirit of joy that she brought to our family and share it with the world, so that people can find hope even if they're not able to feel that joy right away. But we want them to know that when it's dark and when it's night and you can't see anything else, that there's always hope, and that the joy will come within the morning.
Absolutely. And that is what we are all about here on Faith Breathed Hope. And, my audience knows that I too lost a child, and I just cannot say enough how much I respect you and what you are doing. It is so difficult to go through the things that you have gone through. And being able to persevere and know that you can still live your life and be able to enjoy your life after these circumstances, these horrible circumstances, is not something that everybody embraces. It is not
Right.
something that people even believe is possible. And that's what I personally am trying to do. And it sounds like what you're trying to do is to let people know that, you can live your life after you have great loss, whether it be loss of a loved one or, terrible circumstances in any other way. And you can actually enjoy that. We're promised, we're not promised that we're not going to go through bad things. We're told that we will go through valleys. However, we are promised that we are going to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And for
Yeah.
me, that's hope. And
Right.
so tell us a little bit about this new life that you have, because a lot of women, when they lose a child, they can go different ways. They can go one way where they don't want to have any other children. They can't bear that pain. There can be fear in that with becoming pregnant again. There can be a lot of anxiety, but there's also a lot of hope. And I think there are some misunderstandings surrounding being pregnant after a loss. Can you kind of elaborate on that and tell us what your personal experience is with that?
Sure, absolutely. This is something I haven't really spoken publicly on this yet, but it is something that I've been thinking about a lot. So I actually lost a baby in early miscarriage August 22nd of last year. It was very, very difficult because I actually had a horrible nightmare about one of my children dying. Um, a lot of grief parents, they will know that anxiety, depression, very deep emotional and mental and physical struggles will come with the loss of a child. And so I woke up in the middle of the night and I was already in a full-blown panic attack. And usually I'm able to control that. Usually I'm able to say, okay, this is a panic attack. It's not a heart attack. And I can calm myself down through breathing methods and things like this. But because I was already in the middle of it, it was like 2:00 in the morning when it happened. I wasn't able to get it under control. My husband actually ended up calling an ambulance because we just weren't sure what was happening. And of course, the paramedics showed up and we asked them to turn their siren off because the children are just terrified that something will happen to one of their parents. And we just didn't want them to know that there was an ambulance at the house at the time. And so we asked them to turn everything off, turn off their lights, just come to the door quietly, and we would open it. We explained the situation, and of course, I was fine. My blood pressure hadn't budged. Everything was fine. But I just knew that everything wasn't okay, and I actually began to bleed that morning, a few hours later. And so I lost that baby. We named her Regina Joan. And like I said, it was an earlier miscarriage, so I didn't have a baby to bury or anything like that. But it was the first miscarriage I've experienced, and it was a very eye-opening experience, I think, because I didn't realize how much healing had to take place after even an early miscarriage, and how it's really a true postpartum, a postpartum period where you have to rest and you have to heal, and it's like you had a baby but you don't have one. So it was very eye-opening for me to experience that and to begin to understand what it is that so many other women have gone through. And so even losing a 10-year-old, the losses are just very, very different.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
I do grieve more for Maggie than I do for Regina, and in some ways that makes me feel a little bit guilty. But on the other hand, I also didn't know Regina. She had just come into being, and she was tiny, and I'd never seen her, and I didn't have a real relationship with her yet. But because I lost her in the womb, and that had never happened before, when I found out 3 weeks later that I was pregnant again, and believe it or not, we were not trying to have a baby. I didn't feel prepared to have a baby. I wasn't sure that I would be able to emotionally or mentally, even physically, handle pregnancy. And then losing a baby after a major, anxiety attack brought on by grief just terrified me. So what I did really was I ended up shutting my mind down. I didn't usually what would happen, or what had happened over the last year and a half after losing Maggie, is I woke up about 2 or 3 o'clock every morning. It was like clockwork. I would think about Maggie. I would do my crying. I would do my praying. And then that was it. It would be over. And the next day I would be able to get up and I'd take care of my children, and I wouldn't have, as many breakdowns in front of them and things like that. But once I lost Regina and then got pregnant again very quickly, I was so afraid that I would lose this baby, that when I would wake up in the morning, I would binge watch Netflix. I wouldn't cry about Maggie anymore. I wouldn't even think about her. And that also made me feel guilty. But it was almost a defense mechanism of, I have to keep this baby safe. I don't know that that's the right thing to do, but it was just how I responded. And it took about 4 months before that began to take a toll on me. I think one of the things that we all know is that if you don't allow your grief out, it will eventually come out. And so even though I was trying to protect the baby in my womb, I was also doing damage to myself as well. So I had to begin to figure out how to allow that grief to be released, but in a healthy way. And then there was also just a certain acceptance that I had to come to. I can't promise my children that this baby will live. I can't promise anything. I can't promise they'll live. I can't promise I'll live. And that's a very difficult thing for anyone to imagine or to be able to really grasp, but especially for children. It's a very traumatizing thing for them, I think.
Life is such a balancing act, and when you add grief to it, it's compounded and has a new level of complexity. There's so much fear, I believe, and I say that because I don't talk about it much, but that was one of my personal struggles, was fear after losing Isabella. But one thing that a lot of people don't know about me is that I had a couple of miscarriages in between child number 1 and child number 2 for me. And you're right, it's very different. Everybody is different in the way that they grieve, but it's different. I'm guessing from child to child and how you grieve. I had one miscarriage that was over Mother's Day, which was particularly hard. And, because it was attached to that celebration, but, when we are looking at having another child, or even our living children, we may be afraid that, we've lost one child and we cannot protect. We lose that feeling of control, and it wasn't really there in the first place, but
Exactly.
we like to believe that it is. And we like to believe that we have some control, or maybe a lot of control over protecting our family. And when you lose somebody like that, you realize that the control is not really yours. So when you are able to accept the fact that you are having this baby, and you said that you came to 4 months before you were realizing that you needed to really take care of yourself. I know that after our miscarriage, I did not tell anybody that I was pregnant again, for fear that I would start celebrating too soon and then lose another child. And how do you cope now? I mean, you said you're protecting that baby. Are you able to enjoy your pregnancy now? You're pretty far along, right?
Yeah, I am. I'll be 28 weeks on Friday. So I don't know that I'm enjoying my pregnancy, and that sounds terrible to say out loud. I'm just going to be honest, though. I have really difficult pregnancy, so I end up on bed rest a lot, and the first 3 to 4 months, I'm so sick that I'm barely able to crawl out of bed. Like it's really, pregnancies for me are really difficult, and then adding all of the grief on top of that has just made this even more difficult. One of the things that I do is I purposely take time in the evening. Like, I'll try to take a warm bath and I'll talk to the baby, and I will tell the baby that I love her and that I'm here for her and I can't wait to meet her. So I try to speak a lot of affirmations over her, just so that she feels that connection and that love, even if I'm not able to give her that type of connection all day long. And one thing I have noticed, this is my 7th pregnancy, 6th living child so far. And one of the things that I've noticed is that every pregnancy is very, very different. So there are some babies that I immediately bonded with at 4 or 5 weeks old, and others that I didn't bond with until they were born. So it really depends, I think, on what you're going through in your life, what it is that's happened, how busy you are, the stress that you're under. And so I don't believe that we should feel guilty if we're not able to say, yes, I have this, beautiful, loving bond with my unborn baby. It's normal not to have that, especially when you're in stressful situations.
Yeah.
And one of
Go
Go ahead.
ahead. I was just going to say, I think that, it ebbs and flows with all pregnancies, like you said,
Yes.
because I have been pregnant and not felt that attachment until after
Mhm.
the baby was born. And then I've had other pregnancies where I was really super excited. So it may be some kind of
Yes.
hormonal thing. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it may be. That's very possible. That wouldn't surprise me at all. One of the things that also, I speak a lot of affirmations over the baby, and that helps me as well to have that moment of connection.
Mhm.
I also went, and I usually don't do this, but I also went and got a 4D sonogram, so that I could actually see her face and look at her lips and her nose and her eyes, and to see, how she's forming in the womb. And I think that has also helped me a lot. And I've never actually done that with any of my other babies. I usually, just get like a normal sonogram and I can see their little outline. But this one, I was like, I really want to be able to see her face and just be able to try to connect with her in that way. So I think that helped. And then the other thing that's helped me emotionally, just to cope with the fact that I can't promise that she'll live. Uh, my 9-year-old came up to me the other day and she said, Mom, she's like, I want to tell you something. I said, okay, go ahead. She said, I'm just really worried that this baby's not going to live. She said, and my 16-year-old has said the same thing to me. I'm just really worried that she's not going to make it. And
Aw.
I told her, I said, I told her, I said, Nicaea, I can't promise you, and you already know this, I can't promise you that our baby girl is going to live. I can't promise you anything about life. All I can promise you is that, one, we're going to make the very best we can of the moment that we have with each other.
Mhm.
And two, this baby has been created for a very, very special reason. I don't know what that reason is, but I told her every single soul who comes into this world, whether they live past birth or not, they all have a special role to play in this world. And I really, truly believe that. I told her, can you imagine a world without Maggie?
Mm.
She thought about it and she said, no, I can't. I told her that's because Maggie brings a certain light and a certain love to the world that no one else can bring, because she's a unique individual. And
Mhm.
she can even bring that to the world from heaven. And I told her it's the same thing with you and with me and with every person in the world. So it's the same thing with our baby.
Mhm.
And that's something that I had to come to grips with as well for myself. And like I said, it's more difficult for little children to come to understand that. But I just had to realize, like, whether she lives past birth or not, she's here for a reason, and she has a very special role to play in this world, and that's why she's been created. That's why God's created her.
And I love that so much. One of the things that keeps coming up lately with people that I come in contact with is that, especially women who have lost children, or people, even men who've lost children, but why would God give me a child and then take that child away? And there
Yeah.
can be so much anger towards
Yes.
God because they look at it as, um, stripping them and stealing something from them and depriving them of their love. And then I was reading a thread in a grief group the other day, and this was a question that a woman had. And what happened were there were a mix of answers, and there are some people who were saying, yes, I'm very, very angry at God. I can't go back to church. I curse him. Yeah, I can't believe he would do this to me. And then there were other people who where I feel like I am, and actually have been, because I didn't really ever get angry at God,
Mhm.
was that they would say things like, you know, my child is a gift. And that takes a lot to come to that place. And I am at that place, but I feel like the only reason that I'm at that place, because we're only 3 years out. You said you're almost 2. So I'm
Mhm.
only 3, but I believe that God gives us that peace that we can't possibly understand, because if we don't have that peace, then our human fleshly brains start searching for answers. We
Mhm.
start wondering why. why could you let this happen? Why did this happen? What could I have done to prevent it? And then that leads to guilt and blame and anger and all these other emotions that keep us stuck in, and maybe stuck is not the best word, but they keep us in this place where we cannot experience that joy. We cannot experience life because we are so focused on all of this anger and guilt that comes from these questions, these whys and these what if I did that and what if I did this, and how could you allow this to happen? And it's such a wonderful place as a grieving mother or anyone who grieves to be able to say, hey, you know what, I thank God for the gift of her life.
Mhm.
Instead of saying, how come you took her? I thank
Mhm.
you for giving me her life because she was such a blessing. And that is a statement that could possibly anger some people listening if they're not in
Yeah.
a good place yet.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I try to be very careful about, because as you and I, we've talked about a lot in the past about how everyone grieves differently.
Mhm.
Husbands and wives grieve differently from each other, even though it's the exact same child that has died, or the same loved one. So I try to be very careful about it because I don't want people to feel guilty about where they are, or
Mhm.
but I also want people to know that there is hope, that
Mhm.
there can be joy found again. And when you can't feel joy, I think it's when hope is destroyed. I think that's when all of um, that anger and that anxiety and that frustration, all of these things just come piling in, and especially the
Mhm.
guilt. It's so easy to feel guilty over your child dying. It's so easy to go there, and it's
Right.
something for myself, I have to fight against it constantly, even 2 years later. It's a very dark place, and I've told myself I'm not going to that dark place. I'm not going to succumb to the darkness, because I don't feel that that's where I should be.
Mhm.
And I don't like it when people tell me, oh, well, Maggie wouldn't want you to be sad. Well, that's just science. We're going to be sad when our child dies. We're
Mhm.
going to cry when our child dies. That's just a fact of the matter. It's science. It's how our brains respond. And
Mhm.
we can't help a lot of those things. We can't help collapsing on the floor of our closet at the end of the day and
Mhm.
screaming and crying. Um,
Right.
and I don't think that it's wrong to ask God why. My 16-year-old came to me, this was months and months ago, and I was really surprised. She said, Mom, she said, I've realized something. She said, it's not that God took Maggie, it's that God allowed Maggie to go. And I
Mhm.
started thinking about that, and I was like, wow, there really is a difference in that.
It's
There's a difference in
profound.
saying, yes, there's a difference in saying God killed, because what you're saying when God took my child is God killed my child.
Mhm.
But that's the opposite of the God that we know. That's the
Yes.
opposite of the love that Christ has shown us, the sacrifice that he has made for us. And so to say that God killed my child, I don't agree with that at all. I believe
Right.
my child died because of a brain tumor. That's it. And God allowed her to go to heaven. And I think that if we as Christians, if we understand what heaven is like, then there's not just a sense of grief and deep loss, which obviously exists all the time for me, but there's also a sense of happiness for that child,
Mhm.
because she's been saved. She hasn't been killed. She's been saved from the struggle of this life, and from the trials of this life, and from the suffering that she would face if she was still here.
Mhm.
If heaven is truly a perfect place and a beautiful place, and we all want to be there, then I'm really, really happy for her.
Mhm.
And again, I realize that that's going to rub some people the wrong way, but
Right.
that's just how it is. That's how our grief has been from the very beginning. We thanked God that he was allowing her to enter into heaven, and to enter into that eternal life that we're all supposed to be striving for.
Right.
If our goal is to get to heaven, then our goal is also to help our children get to heaven. And when your child dies and goes to heaven, you've accomplished that.
Mhm.
I realize that may be provocative to say.
Well, I mean, when you and I have talked a lot about how, like you said, different people grieve differently. And so
Right.
one thing may be of comfort to you and anger someone else, or vice versa. And for me, that turning point came when I realized that I was not in control. And I know
Hmm.
words like control and choices, those are very, those are what we call fighting words, I guess.
Right.
And
Right.
so, I don't want to provoke anybody, but for me, that was very much what it was about, realizing that,
Yeah.
it didn't matter what I could have done or what I should have done or what I wish could have happened and how I prayed for the supernatural healing for my daughter, because it wasn't going to bring her back. What mattered was that I had her here and that God trusted me to take care of her, instead of another family while she was here on earth. And that's how I'm able to look at it as a gift. And, you know, and as far as the choices, I, like you said, that grief is still there. Just because you say, "Hey, I
Absolutely.
believe that God wants the best for us, and I believe that, you know, God will turn something into goodness, from our life standing here going forward," doesn't mean that you're not going to be sad. It doesn't mean just because you choose that peace and you choose to, bring that joy into your life, that you're not going to have these moments where you're falling down on your knees in sorrow. But what it does mean is that you're not going to stay in that place, that you can
Exactly.
be allowed to miss your child. You're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to tell God every single thing you're feeling. And I don't believe that you have to pray a certain way. I don't believe that you have to be on pins and needles and say the perfect thing for him to answer your prayer or give you comfort. I believe that when you come to him and you drop things in a raw, honest manner at his feet, that he is going to honor that. And for me, like I said, that's just how I was able to begin the walk forward that I am walking in. That I don't believe in 10 years I'm going to be over anything. And I would never
Right.
advocate that for anybody who has lost,
Right.
but we can move forward. And we've talked about this before
Yes.
as well. So um, we won't get into this extremely deeply, but I do want you to mention, because we had spoken about this before, this new baby, this new life, when she comes, do you have any ideas, any thoughts on how your other children, will react to this baby as far as their loss of Maggie? You've already stated that, they wonder if you will carry to term, because of, I guess, the miscarriage and the loss. So they do have some fear there. How do you help them through this?
And it's so hard to help your children through suffering the loss of a sibling. I think for myself, that's been one of the most difficult things about this entire journey. It hasn't even been my own suffering. It's been watching all my children suffer. And I don't go into a lot of details just for the sake of their own privacy, but suffice it to say, it has been a very difficult journey with our children. My two oldest are 16 and 9 now. Nicaea is the 9-year-old. She was only 7 when Maggie died, and her and Maggie were best friends. So her journey has been a very long, a very difficult one, and she has truly, truly suffered. And so, the only thing that I've been able to do, obviously, other than therapy, counseling, things like that, grief support groups, the only thing that I've known to do from my perspective at home is to continue to do my best to show her the joy that can be found in the midst of grief, the hope that exists within grief. And she has actually started writing. She was using my laptop the other day to write like a little paper on grief. And I haven't shared it with anybody yet, but it was really profound and actually very, very deep for such a little girl. And it made me realize exactly how much she's been through and the torment that her little mind has undergone. But I think the best thing as parents that we can do is show our children that hope and that joy that can be found, and to continually talk to them about how each life matters. Every single life in this world matters. It exists for a reason. And, I actually told her the other day when she and I were, I talk a lot with my children, especially my 16 and 9-year-old come to me with a lot of things. And I told her, I said, if I could go back and do it all over again, I would choose to have Maggie again. And her eyes got really big. She said, but Maggie would just die when she turned 10.
Oh.
And I said, I know, but the world without a Maggie isn't the world that's supposed to exist. And I told her I would willingly go through that again because Maggie was supposed to be here. And Maggie is supposed to be in heaven. I told her she has a mission from heaven now. And whatever that mission might be, we're going to help her. And I told her, I said, the best thing that we can do with our lives right now is live our lives in honor of God and in honor of Maggie. And we can be her hands and feet now that she's not here. We can help spread that message of joy and love to other people. So we talk a lot like that. And we also talk a lot just about the basics of grief and what's normal. And that, you know what, you're 9 years old, and if you're throwing an hour-long temper tantrum and mom has to hold you because, you might hurt yourself or try to run out the back door, this is just a part of grief, and we're going to get through it together. And that's been my thing. You and me are a team, and we're getting through all of this together. I'm not going to leave you just because things get difficult, or because you throw a temper tantrum at the end of a day. And thankfully, all of those things are beginning to get a lot better for her. And I definitely see healing taking place in our family. But like you said, just because you heal doesn't mean that grief goes away. You're still grieving, you're still sorrowful, and you're still suffering. We just have to learn how to do that in the context of moving forward and not living a stagnant life.
Right. And I think it's so important to teach our kids that, so that they can learn to transition and to adjust. When Isabella passed away, my oldest was 5. And it's interesting that you say that has been a really big part of your grieving is working with your children, because that was one of my main concerns, was being able to tell him how, about his sister and what happened, and the fact that she wasn't coming home. And then now, we have other children as well, and learning different parts of their grief journey. But this year, we are learning, or I was learning, that my youngest, who is now 5, so she was 2 when Isabella passed away, is missing her sister. And you think, well, wow, that's crazy. How can you do that? But I think that it is, she's just realizing she doesn't have another little girl to play with, and she would know that she was going to have somebody else to play with, and she's not there, and she can't have fun. So making things special for them, and getting them involved in, the healing and the grieving process is very important. Some people would say not to talk about it as much, but I disagree. I think that you should do exactly the opposite, that you should bring it to the front. And I'm not saying that you're breaking down crying in front of your children all the time. I'm saying that you learn to have a healthy way to grieve together. And like you said, that you're a team and you're working together. I think that's beautiful. So, and they'll be better able to cope with things like that as they get older.
Yes. And it's something that my husband and I have talked about a lot. Our children are going to grieve again over a new person, whether it be a grandparent, a parent. I mean, they're going to grieve again. And so what I believe that what we teach them now about death and grief and about life, it really, really matters. And it's either going to help them or hinder them in the future. And, you can speak with any well-adjusted adult who experienced the death of a close person as a child. And if they were not allowed to talk about it, if they never discussed it with anyone, if people pretended like it didn't happen, the rest of their lives are forever altered, and not in a good way. They don't usually understand how to deal with grief. They have a lot of pain and suffering from that death. And they remember what it felt like to be a child and to experience the death of that very close person and not be able to ever discuss it. And I'm very appreciative that we're living in a different time right now, where we're beginning to understand and realize you have to talk about grief and death when it happens. You absolutely must, as adults and as children. And children are just so resilient. I think part of it is that we don't always see their grief, because a child can go from, sobbing in hysterics to playing a game and laughing and having a great time. But like you said, even the little ones who don't remember the sibling, or may not remember the sibling. My youngest she just turned 3 at the end of December, and she was 1 when Maggie died. Now, she was in the hospital room with us just like the rest of us were, and she was traumatized. She didn't want to go to anybody else for like 3 or 4 weeks. I was the only person who could hold her for the first several weeks after Maggie died. Even to this day, if I take her to a doctor, she completely panics. So even at 1 year old, at 12 months old, she understood that something was happening that was scary for her. And while I don't believe that she necessarily remembers Maggie, but she does know about her. We have a table set up for Maggie, a memorial table. We have a wall of pictures of Maggie, and we talk about her all the time. And every now and then, probably even once a week, my 3-year-old will come to me and she'll just put her head down and she'll be really sad and she'll say, "Mama, I miss Maggie." And I'm like, "I miss Maggie too,
Oh,
baby." Yeah. Well, and then
and
our dog, to make matters worse, our dog died last year. So then she says, "And I miss Obi because Obi's with Maggie." So
yeah, we
it's,
have one of those too.
yes, it's like, really?
Yeah.
It was, yeah, that was rough. But, so even at her age, and even though she was only 1 when it happened, and I don't believe that she really remembers Maggie in the way that the rest of us do. Maybe she has some vague memory, but the memories of that sibling are implanted in the mind. I mean, I believe that they are there. And everything that happens to us as babies, it can affect us, as we grow up, as we get older. And that's what's happened with her. So we just have to be really aware that these things do impact children, even if they don't talk about it, even if they don't mention it. Because if we didn't mention Maggie all the time, she probably wouldn't either. But it would still be impacting her, and we just wouldn't know it.
Right. And I have a little story about that. So, I said that my daughter is missing Isabella. And so we do talk about that. And, we created a little passion project, Bows for Isabella, where we mail off sister set bows to people who, apply for them completely free of charge. And I got Elise doing part of this. And or to be a part of it rather. And the other day she had been talking about missing her sister, and I looked and she had taken her jewelry box off of her shelf, taken it downstairs, put it on the piano, and taken the photograph of Isabella from the piano and taken that and replaced it to where her
Oh,
jewelry
wow.
box was. So she swapped them out. So she wanted that
Right.
photograph, and she already has pictures of Isabella in her room, but she wanted that photograph in her room, and she exchanged it for her jewelry box. So
That's amazing.
and I didn't know any of this. I just noticed it. I was like, okay. So it has been lovely speaking with you once again, Jenifer. Can you tell everybody here where they can find you and get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. We are on Facebook, Instagram, are the 2 places that we usually post. It's Joyful Like Maggie, and then our website is the same, joyfullikemaggie.com. If you want to reach out to me, if anybody wants to reach out to me or chat, anything like that, that's totally fine. Just reach out usually via Facebook is the best way to contact me. But we do have some podcasts up on our website that go into a lot more detail about what actually happened and what our grief journey has been like. And pretty soon we're going to be opening up speaking engagements. So we're going to begin speaking in churches and in front of different groups just about the hope that can be found in the midst of suffering. It does not need to be like a grief support group that we talk in front of. One of the things that I believe that I'm really called to is just to speak to women in general, especially mothers. There's just so much that we go through as moms that is very difficult. We're raising children, and we are trying to live life the best that we can and trying to honor God with everything that we do. And I believe that the story that I have, the experience that I guess I could say that I've been blessed with, God's going to use that. And I believe that it can help other people wherever they are, whether they're grieving or not, really doesn't matter.
Right. And, I'm so thankful that we were able to meet and happy to have you here with me again. So thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it and had a great time chatting with you.
For all of you who are in a place where you have experienced some form of grief, whether it's the loss of a loved one or, just any other circumstances that you are struggling with right now, I want you to know that, when you reach out to people and you have a great support system and you talk about things, you will be able to start your healing process. So please do not ever feel like you're a burden. We ask that you continue to be blessed and bless others, and we'll talk to you next time. And I want to thank you for joining us on Faith Breathed Hope, where you gain inspiration and motivation to renew hope and discover purpose in any circumstance. Please like and share this podcast and give us a review on iTunes. Be blessed.